Now, African Americans or Negroes or blacks or colored or Afro, I've actually been through all of those names growing up. You know, it's always nice to have someone define you and tell you what you are. But I am me. You know, that's who I am. But African Americans, and I will use that term, or blacks generally, have always had an interest in science and technology. And in fact, if you looked at many people who find themselves in disadvantaged positions, they tend to do very well in intellectual activities. And one reason is that they have essentially no choice but to engage their minds. And so what I will discuss today is going to give you a very brief period or summary of a period from about 1935 to 1945. And I call that the heroic era. And you will see why I say that in a minute. Now, I am not selling books, okay? But I do have 2 books, and if you have an interest in them, don't ask me for them. You can Google my name and buy a copy, but it is not required. The first one here is called The African American Presence in Physics. In 1999, the American Physical Society had its centennial here in Atlanta. It was formed in 1899. And as part of that celebration, I created a display. And this is just, we had some money left over. You know, we drank enough liquor, had enough food, pork chops and everything. So we said, why not have a little? And so this particular little pamphlet here, about 100 pages, is called The African American Presence in Physics. Now, for those of you who are college professors, and particularly graduate students who have very little money, this is free. If you just Google my name and put this on it, it's part of Digital Commons over at the Atlanta University Center, with a library that has exactly the same name as you have, okay? In a few moments, I will give some comments on this person. The second volume here is an edited volume that I did at roughly the same time as this. Let me ask you this. How many of you know the first African-American, black, Negro, or whatever you want to call them, who got a PhD in anything? And what was that? The first African-American to get a PhD in any subject was Edward A. Boucher. He received a degree in 1876 from Yale University in physics. 70, yeah. So now, one of the other issues that comes up when you discuss African American in science is that most of the northern universities had a very large component of Southerners. This includes places like Princeton, Yale, and so forth. And think about it. The tensions that must have occurred when one looks over and you see this Negro, this African American, colored person, and I won't use the word at this time, this moment, that they might have called him, you know? So one of the things that I always bring up with my students is if a person like that could succeed, and if after his graduation from both undergraduate Yale and graduate Yale, that he had colleagues, and there's a lot of documentation that's written by his classmates. And by and large, most of them enjoyed his presence and thought that he was a great fellow. So I don't have much sympathy for people who claim that is nowadays, that they have problems. Everybody has problems, you know, everybody. And so what if you have problems? You know, get over it. That's what I say. You know, yeah. So that was Boucher. And I could spend 2 or 3 hours just talking about Boucher, because when Boucher left Yale, he went to his first position for about 35 years was at the Institute for Colored Youth. How many of you have heard of the Institute for Colored Youth, which is in Philadelphia, which later on in the great battle between Du Bois and Washington moved out into the country and became Cheney. You look at the Cheney website, they will say, we're the oldest historically black college in the country. We were established in 1835. No, the Institute for Colored Youth was established in 1835. And many of the directors of the Institute are very famous men and women that you have heard of. Now, this is Elmer Imes. Elmer Imes was the second African-American to receive a degree in physics, and he did outstanding internationally recognized research in an area of physics we call infrared spectroscopy now. A close analogy to that is, how many of you have microwaves? You know, heat up your popcorn, you know, you graduate students 2 or 3 o'clock at night, no popcorn, the liquor is gone, the beers, you know. Microwaves generally, you know, most foods have water in it. And so when you turn on the microwave, what happens is that it causes the water molecules to rotate. That's why when you cook with a microwave, the food is different than if you cook in an oven. Because what a microwave does is heat up what? The water. So if you put in, let's say, a lemon meringue pie, okay, the filling will get hot, the meringue will not get hot. But his work was not constructed in microwaves, but was to deal with the general phenomena of molecules, the structure of molecules. Now, almost all the civil rights leaders, beginning back in the latter part of the 19th century, were concerned with not just science, but how the society as a whole interacted and interpreted the intellectual abilities of African Americans. And this is an article that if you get an opportunity, you should read. It's by someone you probably know, Du Bois. And this particular one appeared in the American Scholar in 1939. And he deals with the general subject as to, you know, what he says is that, look, we clearly have a number of African Americans who are doing research, who could do even better and more significant research if they were given the opportunity to have university positions. And so that's essentially the nature of the article.
I want you to listen closely to Dr. Ronald E. Mickens of Clark Atlanta University. He's going to explain in detail some content about the N-word that is and is not acceptable. It's acceptable in the general public. However, it's not acceptable. It's not allowed to be verbalized when you are in college lectures, when you are in a closed environment where there are other scholars and educators in the room. I wonder why. However, many of these are the same people that use the word. So this is another form of, we don't want to hear that word. We don't want to hear the reference point to highlight that word as a problem, because we are trying our best to remove you people from having any value in history. So, therefore, to really promote and press the agenda to remove our people is also to suppress our alpha male professors. Okay? Our alpha male professors that stand firm on their identity as well as they know it, and also stand firm in their manhood. There's an emasculation process that's trying to take place, and this brother is a seasoned Israelite man, Hebrew Israelite man, okay, here in America, identified as a so-called African American. He's a college professor, been one for many, many years, and he has to ask permission to use a word that is a racial slur that is part of the lecture, whether they want it or not. He can curse. You're going to hear him say a cuss word, and they're going to allow that, but they won't allow him to reference the N-word. What's the problem there? It's the process of removing so-called African American history, the achievements of the so-called black man or the black people in this country, the people that were called slaves, the people that were called the Negro, and the incendiary slurs of the N-word, N-I-G-G-E-R. So he's going to be in a position where they are trying to emasculate him in his own capacity as presenting this information as fact, truth. There is no doubt, no reason to doubt, but they will put a reason to doubt in here just because they want him to refrain from using a word of fact, a word of truth that has been placed on our people. Let's hear what he has to say here.
Yeah. One of the most famous, at least African-American mathematicians was David Harold Blackwell. And I'll just give you a little brief synopsis of the interesting parts of his life. He finished his PhD in mathematics and was accepted at the Institute for Advanced Studies. This is back in the 40s. And from there, he spent a year or two at Clark College. They're part of Clark, Atlanta. Then he went to Howard University for about a decade. And based on his research, he eventually became chair of the Department of Statistics at the University of Berkeley, of California at Berkeley. This is back in the 1950s. I mean, but just think about that. But there's an interesting history behind that. One is he was offered a position at the University of California, Berkeley Mathematics Department. And the faculty in the department voted on him to become a member. But unfortunately, the wife of the chair of the department was from some southern state. I'm not sure which one, Mississippi, Texas, or whatever. And what she said to her husband was, I am not going to let any, is it allowed to say the N-word here? No. It's not allowed?
You can't say the word.
Well, you cannot?
You cannot say the word.
Why not? I mean, why not? I mean,
Leadership in Atlanta. You can't say the word.
yes, you can. I mean, I can say it right now. So that's not the issue. I mean, for example, how many of you have read the little poem by Count Cullen called Baltimore? Okay. So you're saying that a whole set of black literature cannot be repeated because somebody gets upset by the N-word. That is bullshit.
You've observed here how Dr. Ronald E. Mickens, you just listen to the voice or the tones of the individuals or individual. He's trying to reprimand him, and he's holding the floor. Okay? This is what this sick agenda has done and is trying to accomplish among our people. One thing that I have a problem with is the fact that Dr. Blackwell is the topic. Okay? He's a PhD mathematician. He's the topic. Another Negro, a Hebrew Israelite, an accomplished hero among our people. And because there was a comment made specifically about calling our people the N-word, which is a fact. It is 1,000, 10,000, 100,000% true. These people, this European beast system, this Eurocentric agenda, they are the ones that coined the name, and they now teach leadership classes that you're not supposed to allow another professor to reference that word in order to continue to keep the validity of accuracy and truth within the content that they are presenting. So therefore, what happens is his content becomes slightly discredited because he had to take a break and debate. This is the sick mindset. He has to take a break and debate whether or not he could use the N-word that's written in the books, the articles, the findings, the references that had to do specifically with Dr. Blackwell, who was the subject matter where this reference must be brought to light. You should have a mindset right now that you have a desire to really expose what's going on in higher education. You see, I have a report from someone who is a master in education, and the individual who's the master in education advised me that there is a new trend that is being applied, an agenda that is being enforced in education right now. The agenda is to completely remove information that specifies anything about Negroes, anything about black people, anything about African American, anything about black people and Hebrew Israelites are the same people from the Bible. Any and all of that content and information, there is an agenda that is being heavily pushed and pursued by the educators, okay, the people that are holding the doctorums, the PhD scholars in higher education. They are adamantly removing all references that has to do with the history of Negroes, Hebrew Israelites. Not an old plan, but this is a new plan within the past 2 years. The plan is to completely remove all references written in education curriculum that has to do with anything with black people, Negroes, the children of Israel. So within the next 3 years, which will be 5 years, your child will go to school, or your child will be among other racial groups of people. And when your child tries to speak about their ancestral history, the other children will say, that's not true. Your people, there's no such thing as your people even being in existence back then. That's the plan. That's what's happening right now. Listen to Dr. Ronald E. Mickens one more time. Listen to the back end of what he's saying. He's actually taking a break from the lecture to debate an individual who says that they have university leadership courses that specify you cannot reference the N-word when you're giving a lecture.
Why not? I mean, why not? I mean,
Leadership is loud. You can't say the word.
yes, you can. I mean, I can say it right now. So that's not the issue. I mean, for example, how many of you have read the little poem by Counter Cullen called Baltimore? Okay. So you're saying that a whole set of black literature cannot be repeated because somebody gets upset by the N-word? That is bullshit.
So you see, this professor, Dr. Ronald E. Mickens, that is a very, very excellent rebuttal in the debate. He had to stop his lecture that was giving heroic accolades to Dr. Blackwell, okay, who was also a Negro, who was also an Israelite, Hebrew Israelite. He had to stop his lecture of giving those accolades in order to address a debate about using the N-word in his lecture during his presentation, because someone felt uncomfortable. Some people sitting in there felt uncomfortable. Well, why aren't people uncomfortable all over this country using that word? Why isn't that word banned? Why isn't that word a word that is, it will cause you to have a fine issued? You will have to pay a penalty. You see, if you go around saying, he's going to make a reference later on to another group of people that has been hijacking our people, and he knows, and he said something, and then he had to divert from that conversation. So, if we go around saying "Hi Hitler," okay, if we use "Hi Hitler" just as a reference, okay, to make an incendiary or a social, urban legend comment or some form of a slur. As soon as we go around any place in the social general public and you reference "Hi Hitler," you say "Hi Hitler" just like you say the N-word, okay? People hair rise up on the back of their neck, and all of a sudden you are called an anti-Semite. Okay? Well, guess what? They are not Shemite or of the line of Shem. They're Europeans. That's a civil war. But it's the moment you reference "Hi Hitler," all of a sudden you have to pay a penalty for that. This college professor, this university professor, a doctor, a PhD scholar in physics, mathematics, including his own ancestral history in this country. He's bringing light to the word and bringing light to how our ancestors their history has been removed from education in this country, and they are very successful, heroic people. He's bringing in how this took place and why this has taken place, and this word is very important. He used the word, okay? He used the word bull, okay? He said that word, and guess what? No one chastised him for cussing. Now, the N word is a more stronger and higher level word than a cuss word. You can use a cuss word during a lecture and slander yourself, but you can't reference the truth, the fact. Pitiful, pitiful, pitiful. That's how they remove us from history, people.
Told you'd be interested. In any case, she told her husband, you cannot have this person. Now, think about this. You got a spouse that you have to come home and see every night, and you got this nice little colored person here who's internationally famous and everything. What decision are you going to make? Hope he gets a job. So, but eventually what happened, and I'm leaving out a lot of the historical stuff, but eventually what happened is a new Department of Statistics was set up. And that's how he arrived at the university. And there are some other little tidbits. I mean, it did not help, I guess, in the overall scheme of things, that most of the outstanding statisticians were Jewish. So you can see there's a whole bunch of dynamics that's going on. So what happened is they set up an entirely new department.
Now you heard it yourself. What I've been referencing for years. What I've been saying for a very long time. Now Dr. Ronald E. Mickens of Clark University, okay, he called it out. He called it out. He clearly said who's behind this. He clearly acknowledged and pulled out the fact that there is an agenda, a certain group of people. He did not say it was anyone else except the people they call Jewish. So therefore, these few years that I've been railing on how our men have been emasculated and are yet being emasculated because of that agenda. Okay? They cannot tell the truth. They cannot reference our ancestral history of well-accomplished Hebrew Israelite men, Negroes, and use all of the verbiage, the terminology, including the racial slurs that were put and placed on them and against them throughout antiquity, because he clearly says there was a new department set up. And that new department that was set up had some people behind it. They were called Jewish. That's the reason why you have to pay attention, people. What I just referenced to you about the individual that I know who is a master in education, these people have PhDs and doctorates. They sat under the auspices of these PhD professors that are of the Jewish agenda. They know exactly who is advising to shut down and remove our people from all history, especially in education. Okay? So I'm not lying to you. A few years from now, you'll probably hear other conscious Israelites referencing these lectures or referencing some of this information, and they're going to start resharing it or cleaning up, doing mop-up work, cleaning up their errors because they supported the other agenda, that Jewish agenda, and they're going to realize, I need to separate myself from that. This isn't right. This isn't an Israelite specific agenda.
It did not help, I guess, in the overall scheme of things, that most of the outstanding statisticians were Jewish. It did not help, I guess, in the overall scheme of things, that most of the outstanding statisticians were Jewish. It did not help, I guess, in the overall scheme of things, that most of the outstanding statisticians were Jewish. It did not help, I guess, in the overall scheme of things, that most of the outstanding statisticians were Jewish.
Shalom, Akiem, Wa, Akwath. This is Pastor Jerry Carr with a little piece of historical update. I just want you to see here how the movement of deception is taking a new turn and or a new twist in the agenda to erase the quote-unquote evidence and or proof and or hard factual content of the Holy Scriptures, Dabar HaKodash, the Holy Word. There's such an agenda out there right now in upper education and or among scholarship. Let's see. Moses is an important figure in all three major Abrahamic religions, but evidence of his time in Egypt or of his existence at all isn't there. The ancient Egyptians were meticulous record keepers, but as of now, there is no evidence of an Israelite slave revolt in Egypt or any catastrophic plagues. In all likelihood, the stories attributed to Moses were part of an older oral tradition that, over time, coalesced into the figure we find in the Hebrew Bible. So, I want you to understand today that now the critical evidence of a black man named Moses, a black man, a Negro, a Hebrew Israelite named Abraham, a Hebrew Israelite named Yahushua Hamashiach, a Hebrew Israelite Negro named King Solomon, the son of King David. They have to identify that Negroes are Hebrew Israelites. So to continue to remove the Negro from the scripture, because if you listen to any typical European scholar of theology and or any doctor of divinity in the European educational system, they will never reference to you that the Negroes, especially Negroes in America, are the Hebrew Israelites that are written in the Holy Scriptures, and their ancestors wrote the what they called the Bible. So they're not going to admit that, and because of that, the simpler thing is to discredit the actual evidence of a physical people that were in the ancient times. And if you can do that, then you removed those people from ancient times and you've replaced them with another people who are not an ancient people. Okay, they're not an ancient people of biblical antiquity. Now you see here King Solomon has been written out of history. The reference point is speaking in terms of their form of archaeological or carbon findings that is not credible. However, they say here in this article, the biblical figure King Solomon is most famous for his wisdom and his construction of the first temple, but evidence for his existence is scarce. Outside the Bible, there are virtually no sources that corroborate his story. If there are no sources virtually no sources to corroborate his story, well, then why would there be a group of people that have stolen the identity of Negroes, whereas King Solomon himself was also a Negro, an ancient Hebrew Israelite Negro? These people today have a place called the Dome of the Rock. The Dome of the Rock is the foundation of where the ancient temple was, or the original temple that King Solomon built. That's what they slate as being the point of origination of the first temple, with credible, fairly credible content to support the timeline and or to support the construction, referencing the great stones and the foundation work, and also the second temple that was built right upon the same exact foundation, and fulfilling the prophecy of Yahweh Shai Hamashiach that the temple would be destroyed and not one stone would be left upon another. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around how these people are able to, or afforded the capacity to, publicize that our ancient ancestors did not exist. We must summarize that because today is a time when our people are awakening to the mass awakening of knowing that they are Israelites, knowing they are Hebrews, knowing that they are the remnant of the seed of the children of Israel. Because of that, there is an extreme agenda to suppress the identity of our ancient ancestors. If they go into that Vatican and go into the basement of those satanic Catholic temples, they will find many of our ancient ancestral records that are of biblical antiquity, and they will see the substantial work of our ancient ancestors. The problem we have is there's many of our people that are consciously awakened to knowing who we are in the scripture, and they rather fuss and fight over phony baloney doctrines, and fuss and fight over how many wives they can have and how many husbands they can have, and all of the nonsense that's out there, instead of putting together a project like this and debunking and or removing the false flags from this Eurocentric seminarial agenda. Now we have come to the chief figure of all human history. Of all human history. They call him Jesus. They call him Jesus Christ. They call him Yahoshua, Yahshua, Yeshua, Yeshua. All these different accolades of titles upon Yahweh Shai Hamashiach. His name is Yahweh Shai Hamashiach, Jesus Christ. They have come to the typification to identify that Jesus Christ, Yahweh Shai Hamashiach, is not a real individual, has not ever existed. Let's see what they have to say in this article. One of the most famous and controversial figures of all time, Jesus is a person whose historicity continues to be debated to this day. While some thinkers believe that someone served as the inspiration for the stories about Jesus, miracle-working messiahs were a fad at that time. There's no way to verify that the stories found in the Gospels are actually accurate. So you see, they threw out the Old Testament and the New Testament, and they threw Negroes out of any form of human identity. You see, we cannot be identified in any historical archives on this planet. Okay, you can go into any university, any education system, elite and or the least of the least, and you will not find references about Negroes, Hebrew Israelites, okay, as being the ancient kingdom that wrote the Bible. They're the ancient kingdom that brought forth the natural man, Jesus Christ, or Yahushua HaMashiach. However, he was also the divine man, Melchizedek, in the ancient times, as well as he is the only begotten son of Yahweh Elohim. He's the first of all creation. So once we allow these people to remove our Messiah, and once we allow these people to remove key figures from the scriptures, they remove Solomon, they remove Moses, okay? They can't find any record. We are the record. How do we know we are the record? You see, when you go to that book that they call the Bible, the assembly of those books, okay, Yahushua said that, behold, I come in the volume of the book, meaning all of the writings that came into existence, that I gave inspiration to those prophets, those priests, those scribes. I gave them divine inspiration to write this information down. And so happened I chose people that had no identity. They were called Negroes, okay? Hebrew Israelites. I chose them. And the way that you will know who they are throughout antiquity is by way of hard bondage captivity, by way of slavery. He didn't say slavery, but it was referenced as hard bondage. It was referenced as being captives. It was referenced as being scattered to the four corners of the earth and suffering massive atrocities. And we are the only people on this planet that live and fulfill those curses that are written in Deuteronomy 28, Leviticus 26, Deuteronomy 7, Deuteronomy 4, Jeremiah 17, Ezekiel 4th chapter, we're Zephaniah the 3rd chapter, Malachi, Micah, Zechariah. We're the only people that you can find and match them up verbatim with those writings in what they call the Bible or the Gospels, that none of those figures actually existed. The reason being is because they would have to give us credible evidence, okay, about our own personal history. That's why you would have to give all of these artifacts, all of the pillaging that you've done all over this world, especially in our ancient holy land. You would have to forfeit all of those artifacts to a people called Negroes that you've identified as savages. You see, even among those curses is written that we would not be called Hebrew Israelites anymore. We would not be called the Yahwadim. We would not be called the children of Israel. We would not be called the remnant of the seed of Israel. It's written that we will be called proverbs and bywords. An entire nation of people that does not have an identity anymore. That's what that verse means. Proverbs and bywords means all of you will not have the same identity anymore. You'll be called many different names. You'll be in astonishment. People wouldn't even believe you are the children of Israel. This is pathetic, but this is what is out there today as so-called credible information to continue the deception to remove us as a people from antiquity. You see, here we go. Among all of these other cast of characters that they have declared did not exist, especially our quote-unquote biblical characters, our biblical ancestors, they're not characters, okay? They are actual human beings that did exist. We would not be here without our progenitors, okay? Now, you can look this up under living.alot, ALOT.com /entertainment /30-historical-figures-who-might-not-have-existed. So you can go to that website, living.alot.com, and you will come across these supposed non-existing people. Now we're dealing with a negress, if you will, a female by the name of Aunt Jemima. And they are going to remove her from existence. So they say, like Betty Crocker and almost every other food-based mascot, Aunt Jemima did not exist. In the late 1800s, Aunt Jemima was a stock character popular in minstrel shows, and Quaker Oats later used her to sell pancake mix. Oh, so this is what I'm telling you, people. You know that you have an aunt, you have a grandmother, you have cousins and sisters, and you know many of them know how to cook and throw down in the kitchen. That's Aunt Jemima, okay? And they are saying here that in the late 1800s, Aunt Jemima was a stock character, okay? Popular in minstrel shows. Well, how in the world did she get removed from history? How in the world is she non-existent? And they said that she's a stock character in popular minstrel shows. That means that there was a physical black lady, a Hebrew Israelite female, that was put in these minstrel shows to be made mockery of as the Aunt Jemima. Also, they had a popular thing during that time called blackface. And they yet do blackface right now. So, come on. I'm telling you, they are systemically trying to remove us from all models of education, of all forms of curricula. They are doing their best to remove Negroes from the curriculum as having any form of superiority or authority or any power of control over anything. The agenda is to validate that Negroes have been savages and animals and apes and monkeys and the least of all people, and they're not worth anything but slavery. That is the agenda. And what they will do is they will replace those significant Hebrew Israelite people, okay, our bona fide famous people, where the scripture says we will get praise and fame in the land of the captivities. So their agenda is to remove our famous people and suppress them and smear their identities and bring up someone else that is a whiter skin, that is more palatable to what they desire. And then they're going to try and rewrite history again without our people, children of Israel, Hebrew Israelites, we know as Negroes. That's what you have as a problem. Here we go again. The guy they call Uncle Ben. Let's see what this article says. If you learn anything from this slideshow, it's this: don't trust the faces behind famous food brands. While the company that owns Uncle Ben's Rice claimed that the name is based on a real-life African-American rice grower, his likeness is fake. The man in the picture is actually Frank Brown, a maitre d' whom the former president of Uncle Ben knew personally. Stop it. You see how hard they are working to remove us from significant identity as being in any form of leadership. They're saying Uncle Ben's the so-called African American, a real life African American rice grower, his likeness is fake. There'd be no rice in this country. There'd be no rice in America. There'd be no rice in this so-called new world if our ancestors didn't bring it over here. Okay? Our ancestors have been growing rice. They were growing rice in Israel. They're growing rice in the continent of Africa. They're growing rice over here in the rice paddies down in Carolina. That's why it's called Carolina Gold rice. Okay? They've been growing rice here. Our ancestors are the only ones that knew how to raise it, seed it and raise it and harvest it. Okay? Our ancestors that are out there on the coast of Georgia, North and South Carolina, and Florida. Okay? There are islands off of the coast of Florida, Georgia, and the Carolinas, and those people are called Gala people. Okay? Gala. Gala is an ancient Hebrew word. It means revelation. And if you observed Gala people and you study the scripture according to Revelation, you will see that they are Hebrew Israelites. So, again, they're trying to derail our people, trying to throw our people off of the bus and remove our identity. And this here is a shame. This is a shame. And Yahweh Elohim is going to let his wrath fall on these people for trying to continue to disenfranchise us as a people and demoralize our people, remove our identity. I told you, this is all they're trying to do, is rewrite scholarship so they will never have to identify the quote-unquote Negro as the Hebrew Israelite, as the original people from that scripture, okay, from the Holy Bible, the Hebrew Bible, Debar HaKodesh, the Holy Word. They do not want to identify us as the people that wrote it, because that means we would be in a superiority position and they would have to follow us into the new kingdom. They have to do it anyway. So, this agenda is very, very strong, is very potent. They're investing money in removing our people from all brands of identity that has anything to do with something that is a major influence to uplifting the world and or people in general, especially when it comes to the scripture, especially when it comes to staple items such as rice, such as Aunt Jemima pancakes, such as the Bible. Okay, this is not something for you to take lightly. Of course, I'm trying to keep some humor going on in these lessons, so it doesn't become such a boring scenario. But we have to take this more serious and keep our campaign going, okay? Because they're campaigning to remove us, and we have to keep our campaign in place to keep us in our identity, knowing we are Hebrew Israelites, the remnant of the seed of the children of Israel. Psalm 83. A song or psalm of Asaph. Keep not thou silence, O Yahweh. Hold not thy shalom. And be not still, O Yahweh. For lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people, and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, Come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel may no more be in remembrance. For they have consulted together with one consent. They are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, and the Ishmaelites of Moab, and the Hagarenes, Gebal, Ammon, and Amalek, the Philistines, with the inhabitants of Tyre. Asher also is joined with them. They have holpen the children of Lot. Salah. Do unto them as unto the Midianites, as to Sisera, as to Jabin, at the brook of Kison, which perished at Endor. They became as dung for the earth. Make their nobles like Oreb, and like Zeeb, yea, all their princes as Zebah and as Zalmunna, who said, Let us take to ourselves the houses of Yahweh in possession. O my Yahweh, make them like a wheel, as the stubble before the wind, as the fire burneth a wood, and as the flame setteth the mountains on fire. So persecute them with thy tempest, and make them afraid with thy storm. Fill their faces with shame, that they may seek thy name, O Yahweh Elohim. Let them be confounded and troubled forever. Yea, let them be put to shame and perish, that men may know that thou, whose name alone is Yahweh, Eliyawan, over all the earth. Shalom.